everyone! Welcome to Two's D&D. I am your host, Kay Purcell. I have done a whole lot of adjusting with my microphone and my setup. So hopefully I should sound a little bit better, but maybe my volume's out of whack. I did some test records. Y'all are gonna have to tell me, so chat, if I'm too loud or David too quiet, let me know. I'll adjust it. So welcome, that's me. I'm Kay. I do a lot of stuff. We'll circle back to that. This is David. This is my co-host. Say hi, David.
Hi. Hi.
Anything? I want to ask if there's anything you're up to, but I know what you're up to, and most of what you're up to revolves around stuff we're both working on that we're not ready to talk about yet.
What I am up to is hoping to develop a mostly original module and to rewrite one of your previous modules. In addition to that, I am doing work stuff and writing some short stories. And I have recently been conscripted to work on a couple of resumes and cover letters. So, you know.
So, also, if you need a resume or a cover letter looked at, okay, thank you. I've heard that the quality's great, but I'm a little quiet. I was a little loud in my test recordings, so let us know how we're balancing out right now. Thank you so much, chat. It's always fun doing quality control on the fly. You test as much as you can beforehand, but you never know till you push record. So, hi, I'm Kay. And I just got to announce, you might have seen in the pre-roll, starting in April, I'm going to be on the Strixhaven Fractal Convergence. This was a 5e homebrew Strixhaven game set 1,000 years in the future from the Strixhaven book setting that was DM'd by our very own Other Side Steve, who's hanging out in chat. I can't wait for you all to see it. I'm playing a T-Fork, who is a himbo Drake Warden Ranger. It was a good time. We got up to some shenanigans. I have like 2 to 3 other things that are going to be announcing, maybe this week, maybe next week, maybe not until I don't know. At some point, other stuff that I'm working on is going to be announced. And we're going to be casting very soon for a series of things that Dave and I are going to be running, and I've got some more D&D stuff to write about here in the very near future. Hey crew, welcome! And I think that covers all the important stuff. Oh, Sundays! Check us out! Sundays on Todd Moonbounce's channel. Myself and the amazing Youngles, who's hanging out in chat. We play on Mothership, which is a very creepy sci-fi game, and I play a character who is not at all disturbing. I don't give David nightmares.
Right. Yeah, no, your android, XM616, fucking lives with me. At odd hours. And so, I watch YouTube in addition to on my computer and on my phone. I also watch it on my TV on my PS4. So, at one point, I had gotten really high because I was having issues, and was watching the replays of the Todd Moonbounce Dead Planet stream.
It is so good.
And, like, fell asleep and woke up with not only my PS4 telling me, yo, I'm about to turn myself off in 10 minutes because you've been gone for a while, but also just like the first thing I heard was Kay's character saying something weird, and I was just like, huh,
I do that.
What? And there was just a solid 30 seconds of abject confusion and a little bit of terror, so thank you for that.
My job here is done.
But yes, if you haven't seen Dead Planet, definitely go on Todd Moonbounce's YouTube channel and catch up so that you can watch the last, 3 episodes?
2!
Episodes?
There's only 2 more episodes. Our next one is our penultimate episode. And I've had some fun conversations with my DM about... Oh, thank you for the follow, Saucefire! Had some fun conversations with our warden about what is Kai thinking? What does Kai want? What are these things? And there were a couple things where I was like, I don't want to tell you this answer, but I have to because you're the warden. But telling you this is going to hurt me, isn't it?
Yep.
So.
Oh, you've never done that with any of your characters. Not once.
Look, I do like a little bit of pain. But in this case, you know, it's kind of those moments where, like, I'm going to say this thing and it could have repercussions, not just for my heart, but for every character in this game since it's survival horror. Yeah, sorry, Jen. It's gonna be fine, I'm sure. It's gonna be fine.
Yep, and Jen's character is calm, cool, and collected with nothing to worry about the whole time.
So, yes, that is a solid 6 minutes of promo that we have done. Hang out, my Discord link pops up. Please pop in, hang out in Discord if you want to play with us. I'm going to be doing casting calls there for all sorts of stuff. Also on Twitter, follow me on Twitter.
Yeah,
we got plans.
Definitely follow us on Discord because all of our casting calls will go through Discord first before we expand to something wider. Also, probably sometime this summer, I am going to start running games off stream. So if people want to play and not necessarily be on camera, there will be opportunities for that as well.
So with that, also Strixhaven Fractal Convergence will be right here on Tuesday nights after this. So come here Tuesday, chill with us, and then hang out for 1.5 to 2 to 2.5 hours of D&D. It should be great. I can't wait to share my promos. It's going to be a good time. We'll be hanging out in chat and talking about it. So, David doesn't even know what's going to happen.
Right. And one last
Mondays,
really
not Tuesdays. Hi y'all. I got a lot of things going on. They're going to be on Mondays. So, not Tuesdays here, on Mondays. I know my own schedule. Thank you, Steve. I'm so sorry.
I mean, you should. I've had a peek at her calendar, and there are multiple colors for different events, work stuff, D&D stuff, other miscellaneous things that she is doing, other work stuff, and it looks like a kaleidoscope.
It's cool. It's fine.
She paints with all the colors of the wind.
Oh, we don't like those references. No. That's bad on many levels.
Listen, oh man. Hoo-wee! Disney. Oh, Disney. 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s. Just Disney. Hoo-wee. Has there been some spicy isms that Disney has rolled out over their long tenure? But that is neither here nor there.
That is neither here nor there.
One other really random, completely off-topic thing.
Oh boy.
To all of the old people who are in chat, to all of the elderly like myself, on AOL Instant Messenger, you could have little animated icons. And I just realized, because ever since I started using Twitch, the emotes have like reminded me of something. And I'm like, I gotta play. It is the AOL Buddy icons that it reminds me of. And it's just like, oh, that's what. So, if I ever stream on Twitch, all of my emotes are going to be either duck related or AOL Buddy icons.
Amazing.
Anyway, now that I've gotten that out of my system, we can start.
Thank you for sharing your revelation with us. Okay, so today we're going to talk about gatekeeping, and we're coming at this from a couple angles. This is not going to be, a super lecture one. Largely because the thing that started this whole conversation is that tweet. And if you have not read this tweet, number one, please click it and read it. There is a whole thread, and we are going to... Are we down for a dramatic reading, y'all? Should I do a dramatic reading?
You should absolutely do a dramatic reading.
Now, keep in mind, I am dyslexic, so reading out loud, it's amazing that I DM, because reading out loud, I was sent to special classes because I couldn't read out loud because of my dyslexia. But this is for y'all. Yeah, the person who decided how to spell dyslexia, there's a special place in hell for them. That's
also,
all.
the person who decided on what to call lisp. Cruelty.
So, I'm going to start from the first post. And I'm gonna just do a little bit of setup here that's not in the original post, but Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is gentrification and cultural appropriation of geek culture, cheapened and simplified for the normies. You all need to understand that those of us who were into the game before you made, figuratively speaking, Shaolin monks of ourselves, honing and perfecting our craft in isolation and often ridicule from the outside world. Watching you all get excited about 5e is like the figurative monks watching kids play Power Rangers in the backyard. Yes, they certainly are having fun, but their form is terrible. They have no discipline and won't ever be taken seriously by people who know better. You might as well be playing Candyland. It's an adventure game that's even more simplified, and that game can be a role-playing game if you role-play. Now, first off, look, I would totally play a Candyland D&D game.
Absolutely.
And if you have not seen Dimension 20's A Crown of Candy, that is basically Brennan Lee Mulligan took Candyland and Game of Thrones and made a 5th edition game out of it. It's amazing. Okay, let's see. What do we got? Oh, yes. This dude sounds like some people I know that I don't play with anymore. Yep.
Dyslexia is Latin.
Oh, yes. Learning things too. Hey, Dungeon Master Ty. Yes. So this continues, right? And I'm going to read just a couple more because we could dive a whole lot into just that. But like, I feel like we need to just front load the. Okay. The gates work 2 ways, bro. The bro just makes it. I'm happy to invite you in, but they need to come to my side of the gate, not yours. Not giving you what you like, even when the normies hate you for it, is not giving up on what you like, even when the normies hate you for it, is the very definition of being a proper geek. And then, honestly, this is my personal favorite. I am not gatekeeping. The gates to the temple stand wide open for those who seek enlightenment. Feel free to wallow in the mud outside, but don't expect me to join you or respect you for it.
Zoinks. Zoinks scoop.
Yikes. I'm not a snob. I'm a snobby vintner in a town full of people who only drink Bud Light. Popularity doesn't make the game bad. The game is bad because it's designed to be popular. Okay, so. Yikes. Okay, we can now, we can all agree and we can all laugh, and we should. Let's be honest. The Shaolin monk thing, oh my it's so good and it's so funny and it's so bad and we should laugh. But also, and David, we've had these very frank discussions, and I'm gonna say it even if no one else will. There have been times, and there have been properties, and there have been things that I love, that they started to get popular. And I was like, oh no. I'm not sure I want a whole bunch of other people in this. This is a thing that is mine, and it's close to me, and it means something to me. And this goes a little bit into, so some of y'all here are newer and this is your first time hanging out or you haven't been here too long, and welcome, thank you for hanging out. Please join the discussion. We do react to comments. Like, we are doing this live. We are so excited you're here and we want to hear what you think. I have been a community manager for over 15 years. I started working professionally with communities before Facebook existed. So I have seen this in a whole lot of incarnations across a whole lot of things. Welcome, Saucefire. So I'm no stranger to seeing this reaction, but also, like, I've definitely felt it a little bit myself. I'm gonna say something potentially a little bit controversial and say, I don't think this kind of, like, oh no, this thing I love is getting popular, that scares me, is a bad reaction. But it's a reaction we need to kind of all look at. Why are we feeling this way? And kind of internalize what some of that means. Everyone loves to be the only person who's heard of the best new band on the scene, but it's so much better to share something great than keeping it to yourself. Very true. Dude, I felt that about K-pop hardcore sometimes, says Youngles. Yes, and so this is going to go back a little bit to imagine the time before the MCU, because this is kind of when I developed this theory that before the MCU, before, you know, comic book movies were huge, I had a working theory that if you told me your favorite comic book character, if you actually, you know, if you read and you liked comic books, it doesn't hold up as well with the MCU because, let's be honest, the MCU is a little watered down for everyone, which is great. But if you really were into comics before the MCU happened, and I asked you, what's your favorite comic book character? And you told me, I could tell you a whole lot about yourself. It was like the best fortune reading that there was, because no one loves Spider-Man. No one reads Spider-Man and is really into Spider-Man because they're really concerned about the welfare of people who've been bitten by radioactive spiders.
Right.
No one reads Batman because they think the world is a warm and fluffy place and the law and the justice system is going to take care of them and everyone else. What appeals to you about a popular, or not even about a media, appeals to you for a certain reason. And there is nothing worse than someone liking the thing that you like for the wrong reason, because that means they fundamentally don't get it. And that, let's be fair, that's a little spicy. That hurts a little bit. I think we can all understand that feeling. So again, why was I upset that suddenly everyone started liking X-Men? There was a really interesting moment, and I know I'm talking a whole lot here, Dave, and I promise I'm gonna give you a second. But after the X-Men films came out, a whole bunch of people rushed and started reading the X-Men comics, which was great. But then a lot of the discussions in a lot of forums that I really liked were from people who didn't have the history that we had. So at one point, you know, the White Queen came and took over Xavier's school and was doing all this stuff, and Kitty Pryde was just sassing her to high hell and back, which, number one, that's what Kitty Pryde do.
Right.
But number two, you know, and someone came into the boards and was like, Kitty is so disrespectful. How can anyone like this character? Why does anyone Because this person didn't have 40 years of background to know that 30 or 40 years ago, the White Queen came in and mind-controlled Kitty Pryde and literally forced her to do her bidding and took away all of her autonomy. And yes, Kitty Pryde has every reason to mistrust and dislike the White Queen. But this person was also new to the fandom, so they didn't have the understanding of why this is happening. So they were seeing the victim as an aggressor, and the person who really did have a shady bad history as this person who was being abused. And it was just like, how do I even... You're disrupting the flow of my space. how do I even explain all of this to you? And so we love, David and I both agree, we love new people. I'm a newcomer to D&D. Like, even with all my knowledge, I'm pretty new to it, and I never played back in the hardcore dungeon crawling days. I think most people who watch D&D streams didn't play back in the hardcore dungeon crawling days. So there's some background that sometimes has to be worked on. I just talked a whole lot. David, do you have thoughts?
So, I have many thoughts, but also, as a man, at any point in time, I obviously feel comfortable interrupting you and talking over you. But
That's as if
I think
Saucefire played back in the grindy days.
right, like I in a box in the garage at my parents' house, I have an AD&D book, a PHB, and I think I got a monstrous manual. Like I got, and when you showed me this thread the first time, and we had a giggle about it, and I had some like private 4 a.m. outrage about it, I thought about my deepest, oldest fandoms, because because so many people I know, they got into anime because of Cartoon Network.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember getting up at 5:30 in the morning before school started to watch a terrible, awful, no good dub of Ronin Warriors on like Channel 9, um, right after Teletubbies went off, and I had to time it because I didn't want to watch Teletubbies. um, and I watched Battle of the Planets and G-Force, and then went back and found the original Gatchaman, and then from the 60s, and then watched that. Like, I've watched anime on VHS that was imported from Japan, where there was some guy in Israel like doing the who spoke, he was one of those polyglots, so he spoke English, Yiddish, Hebrew, Japanese, Chinese, and something else, and and Spanish, and so he was doing the subtitles to go to and it was one guy. It was
Yeah.
one guy in Israel who was doing it. Anyway,
So basically, you are from the "don't quote the deep lore to me.
Right.
I was there when it was written" era.
Right. And so, like kids, and I hate to say kids because, like, these are grown people, but like kids these days where they watch their first anime in like 2005, talking to me about what the best anime ever is, and I was like, listen, you take your Naruto and you go home. But on the flip side, one of the notes I made is, I'm glad that the people who used to pick on me for the things that I enjoyed are now starting to finally realize why the things that I enjoyed then gave me joy, and they're finding the same joy in it. Now, I wish we could have like skipped over the whole like causing me lifetime trauma thing.
Right.
That would have been nice. But so like the old guard, for lack of a better term, we have to take a step back and celebrate the fact that people are finding connections to the things that we found connections for, even if they are even if they're pulling the wrong things from it. Like despite my anime, despite like certain genres of music that I was tapped into long before they became quote unquote mainstream, my deepest fandom is Star Trek, without question.
And that's a fandom.
And I've had people tell me that they like the new movies better than the original Star Trek series, and I deserve an award because I didn't immediately break out into a fist fight. So put that in the mail. But the philosophical ideas presented by Gene Roddenberry, despite Gene Roddenberry as a person is a whole separate conversation.
Yes.
But there is something about the ideals proposed that I think we can all benefit from. And when you extrapolate that to all the different fandoms, whether it be Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or maybe less Game of Thrones, but
there's a lot of lessons we need to not learn from Game of Thrones.
Right. But there's so many things, like if it's Sailor Moon or there's so many positive things that we as people can pull from it, and the more I can encourage other people to pull those positive lessons, the better. And when it comes to not having sort of like the deep lore, or missing the point, like, you know, we could do a whole episode just on Rick and Morty. I do think that people who get it need to put in a little extra effort to explain to people, like, no, this isn't a good thing. Like, no, Joker isn't a good character. Like he's not someone you should model after. It's not someone you should look up to.
Also, please don't do a daddy-daughter Joker Harley Quinn cosplay. Please, I'm begging you. Please. Please, I've seen way too many of them. They're creepy every time. Please don't do it.
I have a whole rant about why Harley Quinn is essential to understanding Joker in the same way that Robin is essential to understanding Batman, but that is a whole different podcast.
Sooner or later we'll get to a comic podcast, but not this one, even though I've gone off about comics for most of this podcast so far.
But when it comes to our original point, gatekeeping, ultimately with these issues, whether it be gatekeeping or cultural appropriation or discrimination, exclusion versus inclusion, there's more nuance to it besides do it or don't do it. And there are people who argue in bad faith, like the person in the thread here, that are using good ideals to subvert the well-meaning message. And it goes back to what was written about in the 30s and 40s of it is again a terrible phrase to use, but it is a slippery slope when you are tolerant of the intolerant.
Yeah.
Because when you're tolerant of the intolerant, you make an intolerant space.
Yeah.
And so you have to be intolerant of the intolerant. And so the nuance is we are intolerant of anything that makes our space smaller. And if someone is in our space that makes it hostile, uncomfortable, and exclusionary, then we're going to exclude that person. And that may mean that we as people have to learn new concepts. I have a friend who is trans, and even like 2 or 3 years ago, I was accidentally misgendering him, and I was like, ooh wee, I gotta fix this. But the difference is, I'm not arguing with that person, well, you look like a girl, so I'm gonna call you by it. No, like, you have to make that extra effort to bring them into your space. And that person, important to me, I've learned a lot from him, and it is important that he always feels included and recognized, and most importantly, normal.
And I've said this every time we've gone into these like little things, but I'm gonna say it again because it's really important, especially for people who look like me, to hear. You're gonna mess up. No matter how good your intention is, no matter how hard you try, you're gonna mess up. We live in a world where things are changing. Things that we thought were okay are not okay. Groups who have not been given voices to tell people, like they've not previously, their opinion of this is what I want to be called versus what I not want to be called has never been considered. They're suddenly able to say, I don't like that. And it is not your job to explain to them, well, I tried my best. It is your job to say, I hear you, and I will learn, and I will autocorrect as quickly as I can. You're going to mess up. You're never going to be perfect. It is not about not messing up. It is about what you do once you have messed up. So forgive yourself. Know that it's okay, in that it's not okay, but it's okay, and you're going to do better. That's every time you're going to mess up, you're going to do better. That's all you can ask for.
And one other point, because the elephant in the room, the unspoken thing about things like gatekeeping and cultural appropriation and exclusion is white guys, cishet white guys. And dear white guys, dear cishet men, like, I'm a straight dude, like, making the places that you inhabit safer for other people attracts the sort of people that you are into. Because if you like ladies, and as someone who likes ladies, making a safe space, like having a heated blanket on your couch, having clean towels in your bathroom, and having a online or in-person play space where a woman feels safe, where non-binary people and trans people all feel safe, expands your circle of people that also includes women. So maybe, just maybe, it's a good idea, like, for you should be doing this for the right reasons. You should be doing this to not be a shitty person. You should be doing this because all people are people and deserve to be treated as such. But also, maybe, this will help you meet women too. But
And
yeah, we talk about gentrification. We talk about geek culture, and the same people that are gatekeeping and saying, "Oh, you're out there wandering in the mud with this newfangled D&D system," are the same people that excluded people like me and people like Kay long, long ago, when they were getting bullied by the same people for liking the same things.
And it's the number of times I've had to explain. They're like, oh, well, people who look like this just don't play this game. Women just don't play this game. Well, no, we weren't given access, or we weren't given opportunity. You didn't want to play with us back then. That's exactly like Jen is saying. Like, video games are the same. And we're a little bit preaching to the choir here. But it does bear repeating to anyone who's watching the VOD of this. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much. Every watch, whether it be here, whether it be on YouTube, it helps. The show is growing. Thank you all so much. I love coming every week and talking about this. But like, if you look like, and David and I have talked on this show about this experience before, where like, we were playing a game and it was like all white people and David, and all dudes except for me and one other person. And it was like, the only reason David was there was because I said, I want to bring my friend in. And like, if you look around at your circle of friends and they all look exactly like you, well, maybe you're not making a space where other types of people feel comfortable. And I've absolutely seen it, where you start making a space for women, or for where people of color, or where non-binary people feel safe, and suddenly someone feels the need to kick off. Someone feels the need to make the racist joke or the sexist joke, or like be just a little bit weird, and they're like, well, this is like my space, and it's this weird like mark your territory space thing that happens. And that right there is a form of gatekeeping. They want to be sure that they don't have to change at all, and if someone is going to make them change, they need to be pushed out of that space. So that's all on that. Really have to. We're going back to this really, 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 really funny tweet. Yes, Jen came on 2 episodes ago on International Women's Day and told us some amazing stories. Thank you again, Jen, for your time and your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you could make it for International Women's Day.
So this person I'm going back to this tweet because here's one we haven't read yet. And it says, your game choice actually does directly affect my game experience. If 5e had gotten the same hate as 4e, which it deserves, the Wizards might have gone back to a more 3.5-like system. It worked for Piazzo, after all. But because they decided they wanted the normies' money, all hope of any good game vanished, and they played to a least common denominator design philosophy to pander to them. They appropriated an aspect of geek culture, which D&D undeniably is, and they made it into a more accessible in order to market it. That is gentrification, the Taco Bell effect. You want a fast food taco, Taco Bell is fine. If you want a good taco, go to your locally owned Mexican restaurant and get some steak fajitas. 5e is Taco Bell in this metaphor. Now, I'm waiting. I know, David. Go, David. Go. I wound you up. Go.
So, first things first. Taco Bell's a thing, but fajitas are not Mexican. Fajitas are, like this. The metaphor falls apart because fajitas are not Mexican. Like this man isn't talking about like carnitas or what's the stuff that
chili rellenos,
right? Like tamales. Like they're like 800 different like Mexican, and you took the one American thing and was like, here, this American thing that's not Mexican. But also, there are two ways to approach making a property or a space to increase its appeal. And a perfect encapsulation of this is Deadpool in two different movies. X-Men Origins Wolverine and the first Deadpool film. And in one, there's very much this element of the people who made the creative decisions going, here's a wink and a nod to people who know about the comic books. See, we put your favorite character. We butchered him.
Yeah, his mouth is sewn shut.
Like we completely just subverted everything about this character. But hey, here we go. And then you have Deadpool, the actual movie, made by people who were big fans of Deadpool. And
which
like,
had,
this is a love letter.
In the opening sequence, Rob Liefeld's name written on the to-go cup in the bad guy's car, so Deadpool punched Rob Liefeld in the opening sequence.
Right. Like, there's a way to do a wink and a nod that speaks to the fans, and then there's a way to say, hi, I'm obviously exploiting your attachment to this. And when it comes to and when it comes to this person arguing just because it has a wider appeal means it's bad now. Like, there are plenty of things that have a wide appeal that are great.
Well,
like most people love the Lord of the Rings movies. Guess what? The Lord of the Rings movies were great. Like 9 Academy Awards in one of the movies. Another example is Into the Spider-Verse. I have not talked to anyone who sat down and watched Into the Spider-Verse and went, oh man, this movie terrible because they got like a brown person and there's a woman in it and everyone liked it, therefore it is bad.
Yeah. Well, and even like, look, and I'm tying it back to what I said earlier. I'm a huge X-Men fan, right? That first X-Men movie, I mean, I'm not saying it's still the best movie, but when it came out, that first X-Men movie was mind-blowing. We hadn't seen a comic book movie like that. And David's making...
Listen, I have things to say about Bryan Singer.
I do too. Trust me.
Not appropriate for public.
Trust me. If I could just like delete that.
I just want to key this man's Ferraris.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah. Like more than just his Ferraris, but that's a whole lot. There are things we can do to stop damage. But like, I love the X-Men comics, and I'm not going to defend all of them, but I enjoyed the X-Men movies. They certainly weren't the comics, but I enjoyed some of them. Definitely not all of them. Right? But the fact that they were popular and then more people, again, more people saw the movies, went, this is cool, bought the comics, were like, I don't know all the background. So yes, there was a disruption in my happy little pond of the close group of friends that I'd made who we talked deep and philosophical about the deep lore of X-Men, like the frickin' nerds we are. But that also meant that we got to like, oh, you're right, I forgot about that, because we go and explain something, they're like, oh, you forgot this. Like, oh, I did forget that. And there was a joy in all of us educating each other in a way that wasn't... In fandom, it can get to be a lot of one-upsmanship. Oh yeah, I remember that fact. I was out walking New York with a Wolverine jacket on. And it was a really fucking cool Wolverine jacket. And some guy, I didn't know him, he just walks up to me on the street, he's all like, oh, are you a fan of Wolverine? I'm like, yeah, I am. And he's all like, what issues did so-and-so work on? And my first initial reaction was to like start answering him. And then I caught myself because, again, not everyone here knows this. David knows this. Like, I hang out with the people who draw Wolverine. Mark Brooks and I hung out while I was dressed like Wolverine at Comic-Con. He asked me for pictures. He asked me for pictures of my Blink. Like, again, I work in the deep lore. I help write the deep lore. I used to write comics. I used to ink and color comics. Like, and still my reaction was, oh, I will answer your question, Mr. Gatekeeper. And I stopped myself and I'm like, dude, no, that's not cool. That's one thing I'm gonna miss about quarantine, is not having that. But you can and again, gatekeeping isn't just that one-upsmanship. Oh, you like D&D. How many horns does Tiamat have across her 5 heads? Right.
Like the shit tests just need to go.
Right. Gatekeep, and again, it can also, you cannot intend to gatekeep, right? David and I know each other well, so we can sit down and be like, dude, did you know this fact? And David would be like, no, I didn't know that fact. And it's cool because we know each other and we know how we, talk about this stuff. But to someone who doesn't know that, if I just walk up to someone and be like, did you know? Like, again, going back to Deadpool, standing in line, Gail Simone was standing in line to go see Deadpool where she was credited in the movie. And the dude turns around and says, do you know about Deadpool? And she's like, yeah. And he starts quoting Deadpool at her. And she didn't consider it gatekeeping. She thought it was very funny. Like, she found it hilarious that this guy is so excited about this thing and he loves it so much. But I don't know who to her, it was hilarious. It was beautiful and pure. But that could also be taken a very different way. So, again, and I say this, we all gatekeep at some point, whether we know it or not. We might not intend it. I have definitely started talking about D&D with someone who didn't know it well. And I do this now with D&D with comics. I'll be like, okay, you like comics, you like D&D, like, I'm not asking to be insulting. How into it are you? Are we going to talk deep lore? Or are we going to talk about, oh my god, did you know that you can do this with Druidcraft? Because I only recently learned that, right? There's different levels of nerddom. And if you don't know which level of nerddom you're talking, you gatekeep.
But here's the other thing about producing content that has a wider appeal. Is that should be encouraged so that more people can engage, so that the people who make the content that you love can continue making the content that you love. Like, if it wasn't for if it wasn't for Bendis, as it wasn't for Straczynski, and it wasn't for Kevin Smith and John Romita Sr., then we wouldn't have people like Jim Lee drawing for both Marvel and then later DC. We wouldn't have all of these 3rd and 4th generation people coming along and finding success in the space. There wouldn't be, Black Lightning or System Shock. there wouldn't be all these other branching things that include wider ranges of people.
There wouldn't be Into the Spider-Verse.
Right. Like Blade crawled so that Iron Man could run. And technically, now that Howard the Duck is the oldest film in the MCU, like Howard the Duck had awkward sex scenes so that we could have a romance between Black Widow and the Hulk. Like, yeah.
Yeah, you're giving everyone flashbacks to Howard the Duck now.
Listen, I love that. That movie is so delightfully terrible. Ooh-wee. And also, the monster in the third act is unnecessarily terrifying. Like, not quite as bad as Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but ooh-wee.
Jen needs a drink now.
Right? Right. It's like, listen, the 80s owes us all like a fat check for therapy. Like, that just needs to be. We need universal health care so that I can get therapy for movies that I saw in the 80s. The end.
Someday we will unpack my time with the Labyrinth, but not right now.
Right. But it's important that these places have wider appeal, or else they die in the dark.
Right.
Like, Star Trek was on its way to dying in the dark until it got the, some would argue, horrendous Joss Whedon treatment. But because of that, Paramount went, oh, wait, there's still legs here. And then we got Discovery, we got Lower Decks, we got Picard. Same thing with Star Wars. Now, I could teach a semester-long college class about why Star Wars is bad. And if anyone in chat likes Star Wars, you are not wrong to like Star Wars. Do not come at me and try to tell me that all of those movies are good, that all of the characters are top-notch, because, again, there's a college class to be taught about. Anyway, but the point
Star Wars is a spaghetti western in outer space, and it is wonderfully entertaining for what it is.
It is a very ugly, poor reskin of Buck Rogers, but that's not the point. The point is if you're into Star Wars, great. Star Wars would not still be a thing if Disney didn't step in. Star Wars wouldn't still be a thing if LucasArts didn't make video games that only sold like 2,000 copies. Like, Star Wars wouldn't be a thing if you didn't have these small niche experiences over the 90s into the prequels. Like, it wouldn't be a thing if the Star Wars films didn't make tons and tons and tons of money on merchandising. Like, that's what built the empire.
Actually, David, have you watched The Toys That Made Us?
No.
I'm begging you, watch the Star Wars episode of The Toys That Made Us. It's going to blow your brain. It's amazing.
Can do. But the point is, without people in the 80s going out and buying little action figures, often for kids, then you wouldn't have The Mandalorian. And so for everybody who's like, oh man, you shouldn't, it's like, do you want more of this stuff or nah? Because every year production gets more expensive. And
real quick, get that. Jen, David will confirm, I have plans to run a Labyrinth 5e campaign. The Goblin Monarch.
Our Goblin royalty.
Our Goblin Monarch is going to be amazing. The plans for how I'm going to run it, it is there. I just have to find time to pull it off, and I have to find the right people to pull it off, because Labyrinth is a horror game, just with happy twists instead of horror twists. Like, it is a horror game, and you have to find someone who understands that correctly. Anyhow, but part of what you're talking about is, and part of what this person is very, very upset about, just boils down to play the game you want to play, right? Like, this person is very upset. Clearly, they want a 3.5 system. And look, I'm playing in a... How do I say this carefully without revealing too much? I am working on a thing that is set in a non-5e system. in a very 3.5-ish system. You can probably make some guesses here if you know a whole lot. Just character creation in Pathfinder, in Starfinder, in those is very difficult. And just trying to figure out just how this is. I was ranting at David about, like, there's 3 types of magic. There are 4 types. There's magic, there's spell-like effects, there's supernatural effects, and then there's something else. And how do they layer? I'm still trying to figure that out. Having created a character and, like, done all of this, like, this system is very, very crunchy, and that's fine. I would rather have a 5e character creator system where I'm like, I've got a basic idea, cool, this is how it fits together, and go. But this guy clearly wants crunch. I understand that you want crunch. You can easily crunchify 5e. You can easily put 3.5 rules back into 5e if that's what you want. He just doesn't want anyone else to be able to play that other kind of game. And this ties into, I couldn't find it. I went hunting for it, David. I did, and it was a while ago. But there was a thread. Oh, I know how I found it. So again, the people who are gatekeeping about this sort of thing are often gatekeeping about other things. Intersectionality. I tweeted a cute, just a funny little D&D thing about, like, me IRL is aggressively asexual. Me in D&D, what if our characters ship, right? Like, and someone replies to me, something being a whatever means that it just doesn't exist. So it's basically, it's illogical to be aggressively asexual.
What?
Yeah.
How you gonna tell you?
There's no way to be aggressively asexual. That is an oxymoron because the appendix A means da-da-da-da. And I had no intention of replying, right? But I had a few minutes to kill. So, Gonzo is an artificer. Fozzie's clearly a bard. That's all I have to say. So, I had a few minutes to kill. So I clicked this sad mofo's name so I can just look at their Twitter feed. And their Twitter feed is just rants about how Critical Role is ruining D&D. Critical Role has done so much damage. I don't know how we're ever going to fix the damage that Critical Role has done to D&D. Now, before we dive in, I'm going to say a thing real quick. I personally really enjoy Critical Role. I don't know if you noticed all the Critical Role shit behind me. I really like Critical Role. Critical Role got its problems. Critical Role does have some players who still don't know the game after 8 years of playing it. Critical Role is a bunch of white, mostly straight people. Critical Role, they're doing things. They're expanding. They're getting better. They're testing out how to bring in more people of color. They've also got a brand to protect and a lot of money that they want to keep rolling in at the pace that it's rolling in. So I understand they're not, you know, they're doing stuff. They're taking steps. They're not perfect. They're not there yet. They're being aware. They're getting some brownie points, but they're not perfect. Before I go anywhere else, Critical Role is not perfect. Again, we are adults. We are mature people. We are mature nerds in this thing. We can say we like a thing while also pointing out their flaws without getting mean about our nerddom. I love Critical Role. Critical Role canon should be better. Okay, with that out of the way, why is this sad, angry mofo screaming about Critical Role doing damage to D&D? Oh, because this sad mofo wants to sit with his friends and crunch numbers. This person wants D&D to be a number crunch game. That's all he wants. And you know what? That's fine. If that is the game you want to play, please play that game. I don't want to play it with you. I want you to find all the number crunchy people and put them in the corner. And I have a feeling that the reason they think that Critical Role is ruining everything and is not as much fun is because they think that all these really talented, fun, entertaining people want to go play with Critical Role and want to, like, do the role play and not the math. And they're mad because they think if they didn't have the option to do a Critical Role, they'd come and do the math. I don't want to do that much math, people. I love D&D. I don't want to do that much math.
So this goes back to a conversation we had a very long time ago. And this is when you got me into um, the most intense, one of the most intense video games I've ever played, Stardew Valley. Um, Now, for those who don't know, in addition to all of the other things that Kay has done, Kay has also been a hardcore gamer for decades. Decades. Like, if you think you've put in time on a game, you are incorrect because Kay has put in time.
My Switch
But
playtime is like shameful. I am ashamed to show people how much time I have logged on my Switch.
I had this moment where I was like, oh man, it really seems like Kay isn't really like into gaming anymore because she's doing this D&D thing. And about a week after I have this thought in my head, Kay is like, "Yo, I'm gonna send you something, and you need to never tell anyone ever." And I'm like, "Bet, I am the keeper of secrets." Okay, the confessional is open. Let's go. And she sends
He
me
is a
a
minister. He
screenshot.
can marry you.
Right. Um, Father David doesn't judge. But she sends me a screenshot of her playtime, and no, I will not give you a number. But I said in my head, I was completely wrong. Kay is way more serious about video games than I am.
It's not the brand Filthy Casual. It's just a shirt that says Hardcore Filthy Casual. And I'm like, yes. David said it perfectly. We both play Stardew Valley with a spreadsheet and a white knuckle grip.
Yep, absolutely.
I told Kay about the Final Fantasy VII grind I did, and she didn't bat an eye. In fact, I saw the same inner nerd going, yes.
And we had but a while ago we had this really big discussion about what people want from video games and how that determines the genres of games that you were attracted to. And like, I want to embarrass some 13-year-old kid on the internet and make him say bad things about my mother, and so I'm really into first-person shooters. And Kay and I, like, there's some overlap, but Kay and I come from opposite spectrums of what we look for in games. Mostly because I like to suffer, I guess. Because I don't have fun playing my games, I have to win. But in really like unpacking all the different types of gamers and all of the different genres within gaming, even more so than I even understood at the time, despite playing video games for decades. Because there are hardcore gamers that have been playing video games just as long as I have, that none of our games overlap. Like, I talked to someone who they told me about a dozen different games they played on Super Nintendo and Genesis, and I'd played zero of those games. None. Not a one. Despite having played relentlessly since then, since before that era of games. And the same thing is true in other types of media. Like, I'm never going to sit down and watch a rom-com on purpose. But I also really get why some people don't watch, high, really deep, scary films.
You and I have had talks about how I've never seen John Wick.
Right? Yeah, you got no reason to see John Wick. Just there's nothing for you. It's a masterpiece. There's nothing for you there. And the same thing is true in tabletop gaming. Like, in first edition and in advanced D&D, or second edition, there was this big focus on, you go in, you bop the things, you get the thing, and then you go home. And what gatekeepers don't realize is that the expansion of the property, the expansion of the platform, does not mean those places don't exist anymore. If you want to go in, bop the thing, get the thing out of the chest, and go home, can still do that. No one is preventing you from doing that. And in fact, you are given, because of the growing popularity of tabletop and D&D and other similar role-playing games, you have even more opportunity to do those things and more tools to build and explore those things. But that means people who are into the real-time strategy version of tabletop, or the dating sim version of tabletop, or anything that isn't the first-person shooter version of tabletop, also now have places where they can exist and have fun, and their interest can fuel your interest and make your space better.
And there's a really interesting, so again, when it comes to gatekeeping, this is a safe space. I will probably get some hate mail after this goes up on YouTube, but for us right now, we're a safe space. Most gatekeeping comes from guys. Not always, but by and large, the dudes are the gatekeepers. And this, again, from so many years of working in community, this is actually because men tend to be record keepers, whereas women tend to be the more creative. And especially, like, Star Trek went through its own, like, internal fandom war, because a bunch of people came in and they saw potential love interest between Spock and Kirk, and they, there were no new episodes, so they started writing new things. And, well, what if this took place between this? Well, what do you think could have happened between here and there? And and this amazing, creator space began within Star Trek. And the people who were just like, so in episode 13 at 2 hours and 26 minutes, this happened. Not 2 hours, because Star Trek was never 2 hours long. But, I'm improving here and not very well, apparently.
Actually, it was, but continue.
So there was this group of people who were the lore keepers, and they were the record keepers, and they, like, this is what Star Trek is, right? That's it. Star Trek is this. And then there came in a whole group of people who said, but it can be all of this. And that actually was like, it was, the one side of the face black, the other side white, right? And those two people, even though they love the same thing, and it's like what I was saying before, when someone likes something that you like for the wrong reason, there's nothing worse. So part of me I do understand the record keepers, right? This is what it was. Here's what I think the record keepers don't understand. David, how many original modules and original character ideas and original classes have I sent you from TTRPG, the DM's Guild, itch.io, Twitter posts that people have put up for free?
I mean, dozens, and I am embarrassed to say that I have not quite made it through all of them.
That's fine.
There's an enormous volume of them.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I found the College of Regret Bard class inspired by Uncle Iroh, right?
Yep.
It's wonderful and terrible, right? There's all of this amazing homebrew content. But the same for us, fluffy storytelling, go on big adventures. We're not just here to bop the thing and do math. We want to, like, develop our characters and tell moral stories and learn, right? I think a lot these record keepers can't. The reason they think that this is ruining the space is because the space is only what is official. If they were to go to DriveThruRPG or itch.io or DM's Guild, they would find modules and rules and adaptations for 5e that would make this the game that they want. But they're not willing to do that because what is 5e, what is Dungeons & Dragons, is only what Wizards of the Coast put out. It's not allowed to be anything more. It's not allowed to be anything different. And so they're like, all of this amazing stuff is out there for all these people who like the game that I don't like. That same content is out there for you. It's just not being handed to you on a silver platter anymore. And speaking of silver platters, that brings me to my next point of this whole thing. Because according to these people, David, what is happening? They are not gatekeeping. They are being reverse gate kept out of their own fandom.
Ooh-wee.
This is where it's gonna get spicy, chat. This is where it's gonna get real spicy.
So, also, I wanna take a
Chat
quick
is also
jab.
spicy. Oh my goodness.
I also want to take a couple more shots at this person's really terrible metaphors.
Yes. Yes, I'm appropriating Shaolin monks, but also you're not allowed to change the 5e edition.
I'm a vintner in a town of people who drink beer. It's like, yes, in a town of people who eat oranges, you like apples. Delightful.
I am a wine drinker who lives in New York. Trust me, I understand. I can't get good wine anywhere because all people want is beer and cider. And I'm happy they like beer and cider. But damn, I could use some good cheap wine.
And just, and it goes back to like, so I've played a lot of Elden Ring lately because my favorite video game franchises are Legend of Zelda and Dark Souls. Because pain. But like it's like pain and soft bottom protagonists. But there's this like very small, because it's kind of like rude to take shots at the Dark Souls community, because out of the hardcore gaming communities, the Dark Souls group is really kind of welcoming, but there is like a small subsection of, oh, you used any of the game mechanics to beat the game, you are trash, go get good, you fucking noob. But just the idea of reverse gatekeeping, like the idea of reverse racism, all boils down to, show me on the doll where you are being excluded from your space. Show me on the doll where somebody says you, because of who you fundamentally are, because what you fundamentally enjoy, can no longer interact with the content. Because I have been in a tabletop gaming store where I watched a pair of women walk in, look around, turn around, and walk out. I have been at a convention with a sign that says, hey, showers are for cool people. Deodorant is mandatory. And it's like, yo.
You have been at events with me where people walk up to you and say, so who do you work for? Who's your girlfriend?
Right. Yeah. And I was like,
I was the person invited. He was the arm candy.
Could pull something like this.
He was the arm candy.
Right. I was like, thank you for the compliment to think that I could pull like this. Her? You kidding, right? But just the whole reverse gatekeeping thing is this victim mentality, because and I get it because we all need a place to come from when we need to make a stand for the things that are important to us. But it's a thin line between that and making ourselves the victim so that we can then manufacture outrage.
And yeah, Candace just brought up a great point. Add to the gatekeeping for female presenting players. If you're pretty, now you're labeled as a poser or a newbie instead of seeing as many who are just not awkward, right? Like, and I've seen this, having known creators, don't be Kotaku, having known creators, right, who were like, I want to, I am alternate world, I am a white male tabletop gamer, and they're like, I can't get gigs anymore because everyone wants pretty women and people of color, right? They're like, no one will ever, I no longer. Ooh. Thank you, Table Cat Games. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the stream. I've seen people say like, oh well, there's no way for me as a white male tabletop player to ever have a chance of making a living doing this because people only want to hire white or not white women anymore. That's all they ever want. And I'm like, dear sir, I know so many white male tabletop gamers. Maybe you're not as entertaining as you think, because that's the thing with streams, especially with tabletop streams, it's rarely the crunchy numbers that people want to watch. People watch for characters and role play and story and improv. And you know, I'm gonna say, as a woman who goes on these streams, Candace and Jen can confirm, I dress up whenever I can. I will do the makeup. Why? Well, partially because it helps me connect to that character. And it's partially for me. This is how, okay, I'm getting ready for the stream. I'm in the mind of my character. I'm ready to go. But partially because I can. That's an effort that I want to put into it. I want to connect this character. It helps me. And I think it helps me put on a better performance. Could I be just as creepy as Kai without the makeup? Oh, I'm sure I could. But the makeup helps.
Ooh, yeah, no. And also, the makeup is an important part of the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Because, a very minor spoiler, but something happens to Kay's character that is a fundamental shift. And that fundamental shift then gets represented by the makeup. And my friend who was watching it in the room with me had left and come back and was like, oh, why is the makeup different? And I was like, well, here, let me rewind to this part so that you can see why this shift takes place. Wait, pro wrestlers? Like sweet dudes covered in oil? I'm here for it. But it's like another aspect of gatekeeping.
Well, and I'm really quick. We're going, but just want to say, I see a lot of women go through the whole makeup thing. Like, women, no matter what level, we tend to do makeup, do things to match our characters. I see that from male streamers a whole lot less. I'm not saying it never happens. I've seen a lot of dudes paint themselves green, but it's way more common for women to do that. And maybe that just makes us a little bit more marketable, and it doesn't have to do with us being cute or having boobs, because I'm definitely not cute as Kai. I don't have boobs anyway. So maybe dude gamers who are like, well, now that everyone wants black women, I'm never going to get a job. Maybe up your game.
Right.
Go, David.
And I'm telling you, I'm waiting on the maid costume. So I spend too much time watching Twitch on mute while I'm working, because I work from home. I work on my own computer. I don't have to worry about anybody like going, David, why are you watching this streamer? Like, she's been asleep for 4 hours. Aren't you getting any work done? But also people who watch sleeping streams. Why? But I very much enjoy Apex Legends. I would argue that I enjoy watching it only slightly less than I enjoy playing it. But I watched a woman who got to Predator, the highest rank in the world, or in the class of the highest rank in the world. And so she's legitimately one of the top 500 people in the country, one of the top 1,500 people out of 7 billion people on the planet at this game, where people pay thousands of dollars to just hang out and play with her. But because she's attractive, people pop into her stream and go, well, you're not any good at this. And I saw another woman where she had a profile on a famous modeling website, who is also really good at Call of Duty. And so people pop in and think, oh, well, she's just like tinkering with Call of Duty so she can show off how hot she is. And then it's like, and then you look at her numbers, and her kill death ratio is better than most people who play the game. And it's like, Just because you're attractive doesn't mean you don't have anything else going on. And
We
I understand that there's a lot of like jealousy from those of us who dwell in basements and have hair on our necks for people who seem to have every advantage that we don't have, who are also quote unquote coming into our spaces and then also being better than us. But again, to quote the Dark Souls community, get good, noob.
And also, there was an amazing thing that came out at the beginning of the year, and it was like the number of viewers that Twitch streamers had, right? And it wasn't until I think number 27 that a woman came in there. So like, no, it's so easy to be women can just get streamers because they're attractive and they have boob. Well, no, clearly we can't, because we can't even break the top 25 of most watched Twitch streams. And so then coming back to this, like, oh, well, there's reverse gatekeeping now because they're not letting people who are of a certain identity or are a certain color be on these streams because they only want this politically correct. Do you know what that's called? That's called like leveling the playing field. So like, that's and again, dealing with a lot of people. I came up through .com. I've worked in comics, video games, tech, journalism, and seeing the number of people who I've spoken to who were like, well, all of a sudden, I'm having a harder time getting a job because everyone just wants to hire minorities. And it's like, so what you're seeing is like, you're no longer like one of the first 10 people in line. Like, you're just seeing the playing field level out a little bit. Disney didn't give you the fast pass this year. Because let me tell you, as a woman trying to get a job in video games or tech, it was certainly not easy. I was literally negged in an interview about being able to be a community manager with 15 years of experience. Did my 15 years really count because it was at DeviantArt, not in video games?
Yo. I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second.
Go!
I said, like all of my friends get memes. Like, if you don't get memes from me, then are we even friends? But the only things I send to Kay is like cutesy little cats doing things and like an occasional like D&D pun. Because all of the cursed shit I found on the internet, Kay doesn't need to see that anymore because she's seen so much worse that I'm like, you know what? For Kay, the internet's closed. She's seen all of it. It's all done. Like they're like every time a man has squatted over a glass jar, Kay has been there to remove it from DeviantArt. And every worst thing that you could find in the blackest parts of the internet, Kay was there. She was there when it was written. But yes, continue.
Oh, there's an interesting thing that sometimes happens, and I was typing this, but I'm going to say it now. Candace, please, thank you for hanging out. Thank you for taking care of your friend. Please always take care of your friends and your real life obligations before this. Thank you for finding
Absolutely.
time. We appreciate
And
everyone who
lurk.
chats, everyone who hangs out, anyone who retweets. Anything, just being here is amazing. And again, this is an open, like, format thing. If you are in tabletop and you have a thing that you would like to discuss, be it a new system or a module you're working on, be it your experience in the tabletop community, be it whatever you would like to talk about, I would love to have you on as a guest. So open invitation. But yeah, an interesting thing happens when people who are used to having, you know, the Pac-Man part of the pie, they've been missing the mouth. The mouth has always been, you know, people who don't look like them. And then suddenly people are like, okay, well, guess what? We actually need to even this pie. Not even like make it proportional, but we need to make the pie 50-50, pepperoni and supreme. Everyone who's pepperoni is suddenly like, oh my god, all of my opportunities are being taken away from me. And it's like, no, just for a piece of that pie, it's being evened out just a little bit, and it shouldn't even be half pepperoni, right? It should be at most a quarter pepperoni. It should be all these different things, but were just baby steps, and suddenly they're facing so much adversity. And these other people who were fine before are suddenly taking opportunities away from them. And they can't understand.
Someone asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg how many women should be on the Supreme Court. And she said 9. And everybody, all heads exploded. They're like, what do you mean 9 women? Is that even fair? And she replied, I mean, there have been 9 men on the Supreme Court. And that's ultimately what it boils down to, is that at no point have I seen any serious person try to supplant everyone in a group. Like, I've never seen somebody try to do the equivalent of replacing all the men on the Supreme Court with women, or replacing all of the white dudes on the Supreme Court with black dudes. But instead, everyone that I've engaged with in a serious, good faith way has been like, hey, in the Supreme Court of tabletop gaming, in the Supreme Court of video games, maybe, just maybe, we should have like a couple of women, a couple of people of color, a couple of people who come from different perspectives and who have different life experiences, rather than this one-dimensional way of looking at things.
And I'm also going to say, if some of us are trying our best to be good allies. We fall short, but we do our best to make sure that there's diversity at the table. We do our best to pay attention to these things, which we talked in a previous episode. I grew up in a place where talking about race was weird and uncomfortable and a bad thing. You just didn't talk about race. So it's taken a lot for me to learn to just talk about race casually in a way that doesn't have to do with, oh, well, he's black, which is how I grew up. So, just even saying, hey, have we thought about how many people of color and of what backgrounds are we bringing on this? Get to that point. That's a great point. But then, once you've done that, when you bring on those people with different life experiences, and they say, hey, maybe this thing you're doing isn't great, or maybe this thing made me uncomfortable, listen to them.
Right.
Everyone, whenever something happens and a bad take or a bad thing is put out, and everyone goes, gosh, didn't they hire a sensitivity reader? They probably did. And, people of color are not a monolith, so their sensitivity reader might have thought from their worldview, from their experience, because there's probably only one. This, to me, is probably fine. But that might come from maybe they are a person of color with this background but have only lived in America. Maybe they are a person who is, from a culture that they've, paid them for their life experience, but they've never lived in America, so they don't have the, there's so many different ways to experience things. So, and even if two people who grew up in the same city and are of the same ethnicity might feel differently about the same thing, and that's also fine. People are not a monolith. On top of that, even if they did bring it up and did say, I think this is a problem, usually sensitivity readers are brought in at the very last minute. Not how it should be. Bring your sensitivity, bring in and pay your sensitivity. I'm gonna get through this word. Sensitivity readers early and listen to them, because usually what happens is they bring in that sensitivity reader. The person says, I think this is going to be a problem. They've already invested a lot in this. They don't want to have to pay to change it. That means more work, more money, more delays. So they say, how bad is it going to be if we don't change it? Don't put your sensitivity reader in that situation. I'm begging you.
And to circle back to something that we talked about before is, Kay made a comment about preaching to the choir. And while it's true, everyone here believes in the importance of an inclusive experience for everybody who wants to participate. All of us want more people to engage in this space and want to work together to make it so that people feel comfortable doing so. But I think it's important in a lot of ways to quote unquote preach to the choir, because the more we continue to talk about these things, the more the ideas and concepts and solutions that we come up with leak into other places. And then, in addition to that, what's really important is normalization, because there are old people running around right now who would refer to me as a Negro. And they're like, listen, I'm being racially sensitive here. Like, I'm using the preferred nomenclature for your people. And I have to take a step back and go, no, they are doing their best to be racially sensitive, and I appreciate that. But part of why they are still stuck there, rather than referring to people as black or African American or person of color, because black, African American, and person of color can often be three different things. Because need I remind you that Elon Musk is an African American, and it is important that we continue having these conversations so that we can normalize the evolutions of inclusivity. Like 5 years ago, it wasn't normal for me to use they them pronouns. And, you know, as a cishet man whose perspective is everything is a dude until proven otherwise. Like, that boat is a dude, but PS4 is a dude. And because, like, you know, I'm cishet, I go, I really like that thing, so it can't be a dude, so now it's a lady. So that boat is a lady. My PS4 is a lady. My computer, like, I've literally given my computers girl names this whole time. But it's important that we normalize that so that people like me who are actively trying to be inclusive can normalize using they them, so that we and those who come before us and after us don't end up 30 years from now calling someone black a Negro or an octoroon because they're trying to be racially sensitive. That they are then up to date on how to be inclusive. So it's not just, okay, well, we all know this already because we're all preachers. It's so that we can continue to evolve personally, and so that our communities can continue to evolve.
And also, so we can make sure that we're like, our experiences are real and valid, because I know several people hanging out in chat, myself included, have been gaslighted on more than one occasion and just been like, was I wrong here? Am I making this up? Did this really happen? Is this a big deal? And I actually sometimes have to go to David or go to people I know and be like, am I the bad guy? Am I the drama? Or am I like actually like, where does this fall? Because I'm sometimes the drama. Everything's really dramatic in my head, and then I like tone it down for when I like.
Yep.
But yeah, like, and having these discussions, and again, you can be the most well-educated person when it comes to, you can be as up-to-date as you can possibly be about, you know, you can know every neo-pronoun there is to know, and tomorrow you'll meet someone with a neo-pronoun that you didn't know because they literally made it up last night in their room and decided, you know, they had this moment of eye-opening clarity, and this particular combination of letters is their identity. And you're going to forget that combination of letters. And it's not because you didn't care, you didn't try, you did all the research you could, but we're just in a fast evolving time, and do your best, and when you mess up, do your best again. And yeah, we do preach to the choir a little bit here, but again, like David just said, preaching to the choir isn't all bad, and it makes sure that we're all on the same page. And you know what? I have definitely been in the room where people are like, we're preaching to the choir, everyone in this room knows this, and I'm like, I didn't know that thing. but I'm not going to say I didn't know that thing. I'm just going to sit here and absorb it. And maybe I didn't even agree with that thing, but because they said we're preaching to the choir, I'm like, oh, everyone in this room agrees. I need to go home and think about what they just said, because if I didn't know that thing, like, that is a really good way to affect change. There's so many acronyms, and, you know, things change. English has changed. Social awareness has changed. Had you told me growing up that, like, okay, well, had you told me growing up, you know, I know you don't want to be a woman, I would have been like, yeah, I want to be a boy. And I'm like, no, I actually, as an adult, I don't want to be a boy, but I don't want to be a woman either. So
here we are.
Yeah, that wouldn't have made much sense to me growing up, but now I got there. You know why? Because society changed, and it helped me find my place in it.
And an important pivot from that is how we cannot fall. How can we avoid the pitfall of falling into the trap of being gatekeepers ourselves? And it's important that, especially in circles of, again, preaching to the choir, that we have those discussions, because I remember my first encounter with, for lack of a better, I have a better term, with hostile feminism. In college, I walked by the women's center every day on my way to class, and on the door and in literature around campus, they're like, listen, the women's center is for everyone. Everyone is welcome here, yada, yada, yada. And there was a woman who stood outside the women's center who, on a regular basis, would yell at me for being an oppressor, and basically for being a man. And my thought then was, well, I didn't choose to be a cishet dude. Back before I called myself a cishet dude, but I was like, listen, I'm 17 and black. Who have I oppressed? Like, when have I been in a position of power to oppress anyone? And I understand now that it's a more nuanced conversation than that, and that my participation in patriarchy has detrimental effects, and that some of that participation is unavoidable, but I need to work on the things that I can. But it took longer than it needed to for me to come to that point because of that hostile interaction. And I understand why she was having that hostile interaction, because she wanted to ensure that her space was safe for people like her. And later on, I had to go into the women's center to fix a computer. And the whole time I was there fixing something, they assigned a woman to me to supervise me in a public room to make sure I didn't do Lord knows I don't know what. And on the one hand, fair, because college men, but on the other hand, it's like, this isn't a space for everybody. Like it's okay for this to be a space for women, but don't tell me it's a space for everyone when I'm not included here. And so, just like there are tons of spaces online and in person where I know I am not necessarily welcome there, like, clan rallies, NASCAR races, Kid Rock shows. Like, I get it. Not for me. Not spaces targeted at me. We in this space, whether it was historically for white men or historically for whatever, if we want to open this space to others, if we want to make a welcoming space, and that is the entire thesis that Kay and I have in our approach into the D&D content that we both create and support, then we need to make sure that we're not being hostile to people who are interested, that we are not being hostile to our potential allies in this space. And I think that is part of what's really important about really looking at gatekeeping, is looking in the mirror and going, okay, what lessons can we take from the missteps of others?
And you know, I'm gonna slightly back this up too and say, you know, going back to, you know, oh, reverse gatekeeping, there's gatekeeping, you know, they only want to hire and work with people who look a certain way. Like, okay, maybe that's true. There is definitely a thought to when you're building out a cast, who do I want to appeal to? I do, like, I personally don't just want white dudes watching my streams because a lot of my stories aren't for white guys. They might resonate with white dudes, but that's not, I hope that while my storytelling will never be accurate for a person of color, because I am not a person of color and I can't express those lived experiences, I hope I can tell stories that that people of other experiences will go like, this person has spent time reflecting and has spent time understanding things, and I can go on this adventure with them. I can go on this journey and I can understand, and I as a person can enjoy and grow. That's how I spend a lot of my time creating, is I want people to be like, this is good. This is something I can relate to. Because look, I grew up with JRPGs. I grew up being very confused about my sexuality because I liked the boys in the game more than the girls in the game, which should have been fine because I'm a girl, but I was playing a boy in the game, so I wasn't supposed to like the boys in the game, but I extra liked it that the boy in the game liked the boys in the game, and that was really bad because it was Bible Belt, and it was a very confusing situation. And if I could find ways to relate to all of that and still come out, I mean, okay-ish, then I promise you.
Amazing and decadent.
And, you know, going back to, okay, well, what if they're only hiring? What if all these opportunities are now, what if they really do want mostly people of color? Okay, cool. Look at the Black Dice Society, which is one of my favorite streams. I love the Black Dice Society. It is some of the best D&D on the internet. There is exactly one white dude. And that white dude is Mark Meir. And if you don't know Mark Meir, he's the voice of Male Shep. He is one of the best role players and cosplayers out there. His character, Brother Uriah, has such a tie into this game. There are layers. And you know what? Yes, there is only one white guy on that stream. But that white guy is the white guy on that stream. Also incredibly nice. I had the great privilege of meeting him. And he went out of his way to ask for a photo with me and thanked me for watching the show. Like, this guy is the whole package. You want to talk about, oh, well, this charity stream recently that just happened for the women's, I don't remember the whole name of it. It's a crisis hotline for survivors of sexual violence. Amazing stream that B. Dave Walters does every year. They had they had one white guy and they had one guy of color. The white guy was Brennan Lee Mulligan. So, okay, if the future is there is only going to be one white guy and it is Brennan Lee Mulligan or Mark Meir, awesome, white guys. Get good and get that position. If you were that good, I want that level of white guy in every performance.
And it's funny because as you talk about who you want to engage with your content, obviously, like, I want people of color and I want members of the Alphabet Mafia and
that's LGBTQIA plus, by the way.
Yeah, I should be, but listen, I like the idea of them being like,
just a lot of people are like, what does that mean? So
yeah, but I like the idea of them being a mafia, but and I want white men, like cishet white dudes, to engage with the content that I produce equally to women, non-binary, transgender, people from different experiences. I want white people to engage in my content and go, okay, this is a taste of a different perspective. It doesn't necessarily have to be the black perspective, but this is a taste of a different perspective that I can still engage with. Because one, cishet white men can be and often are allies.
And we need them to be allies.
And I want them to feel included. And I've been extremely fortunate. I've had friends who are Native American. I've had friends who are trans. I've had friends and family who are gay that have given me, and luckily I've also had friends who are women. So I have had
You have women
people,
friends, really?
a couple, one or two. Um, I don't know why, I don't know how, but I do. But they've given me a bridge into their experiences. Like Kay and I have spent a lot of time talking about feminism, um, especially the experiences of women in male-dominated spaces, whether it be tech or video games or comic books or journalism, all things that Kay has an enormous amount of experience in, way more than I do, and it has been extremely illuminating. Um, and I've been fortunate enough to be given bridges into these experiences so that as an ally, I can get better educated, and also I can um, interact with, engage with, and ultimately enjoy content that isn't necessarily targeted at me. Like, I can sit down and watch She-Ra, which is not a show that's pointed at me. And I'd be like, oh, I get it. And I understand the underlying themes behind this. And I personally don't benefit from, hey David, this is how you process your your sort of teenage hormones as a woman, especially if you like other women or if you like dudes or if you like non like I that's not something I need, because I didn't have to go through that journey, but I can ultimately enjoy that content because of these bridges. And so I want to pay it back or pay it forward and put out connections that people who are outside of my experience can then make their way in a healthy, informative, and entertaining way without feeling excluded, without inviting that toxicity. And I think that's really, really important for me.
And I'm going to make 2 points. David and I, one of the first things we actually, the first piece of media, the first piece of content that we connected, that we realized we liked this thing over, was the Dragon Prince.
Yep.
And there's a lot I like about the Dragon Prince. Mostly things I'm not supposed to like, because, the king...
Oh, the massive, very aggressive, in-your-face homosexual overtones.
Yeah, I was like, I am here for this, but also, yeah, that was, look, I know that's not the thing to take away from the Dragon Prince, but they were like, we have to leave the castle, and I'm like, no, the gayness is back in the castle. Please don't leave the castle. I love that. But, also, Dragon Prince is this great little story, and yes, it largely focuses around the elf, the horny Irish elf, because she has horns. And the white kid, Callum, right? So it's primarily focused on 2 white people, but then there's the little brother, there's the king, and I remember just being like, this is a good story, and I can, this is something that I can share with David, and it's really good, it's really wholesome, it looks good, and then there's hee also, it's really, really gay, and hee. Yep. And I remember I had this moment where, I sent him the thing, and I'm ready to talk about all this stuff, and the thing that he comes back with was, I've never seen a kid with hair like mine in an animation before. And I remember just being so blown away with that, because yes, I'm a girl and I grew up being oh my god, all the girl characters in video games, they're never gonna look like them. But I'd seen a blonde girl. I'd seen girls with hair like mine. It's just their boobs were really big and they were dressed in really weird gravity defying outfits that I could never wear. But I'd at least seen people who looked like me. And it really hit me in that moment. And so intersectionality in everything that you build is really important. Even if it doesn't speak to you, no, I really can't. Even if it doesn't speak to you, it also, having diversity in your content makes it easier to share for others. As an example, I have a friend at work who has never played D&D, and after hanging out with some of us nerdy people in the office and hearing us talk about it, she wants to play D&D. She's never played D&D. She is a grown woman of color, has never played D&D, and is like, I kind of want to play. She started with, I'm interested in it. What can I watch? And so I did a lightning talk at work about D&D, and I suggested several shows. Obviously mentioned Critical Role, largely because the company I work for, we've had some Critical Role voice actors work in our games, so it only made sense for me to say, hey, company Ty, you should watch this because people in it. But I'm like, but also please watch these other things, including, and the two of the big ones I pushed at, Into the Motherlands and Black Dice Society. Into the Motherlands is harder because their first episode, like it was they were building the game still. But I pointed her at Black Dice Society because there were so many faces of color there. It wasn't just a white experience. And again, as much as I love Critical Role, they've told some great stories, but like, I love Bo from season 2. I love Marisha. I love Bo. But Bo was a story from a person of color told by a white face. And yes, it was good, but it was still a story that would have been better being told from someone else. And with Black Dice Society, B. Dave Walters is a person of color. Cypher of Tyr, DJ Knight are people of color. Neurological, yes, she looks white, but she's also a person of color. She's white passing, but that doesn't make her any less of her culture. And it's so much easier to be able to tell someone who I know, she'd had discussions. She'd heard about the Satanic Panic. She'd heard that like orcs and dark elves were black and stereotypical. So is there even a place for me here if major things within this? Erika Ishii, Critical Bard. I love Critical Bard. Gabe James Games. So if you deliberate, one of my favorite phrases, and I've said it here before and I'm gonna say it again, if you don't deliberately include, you will accidentally exclude. And it's so much easier for me to tell people who I know, are of color, come from a minority background, or LGBTQIA, look, go to this stream. I will send someone who's LGBTQIA to Shakar, because even though none of the characters are currently in a same-sex relationship, you can tell that the majority of the players there's a comfortableness about it. They joke about the fact that they're gay, that they're bi, that they're open about what they feel. And even though their characters aren't hooking up, they're comfortable with it in a way that's recognizable if you're of that community, as opposed to like, oh yeah, well, my guy character's interested in that guy character over there, DM. And you'll be amazed. I don't even want to say you'll be amazed, because you probably won't even see it. You probably won't even know until after your story has concluded and you've stopped recording. Someone eventually will find you at a convention, or will send you an email, or will DM you on Twitter and say like, hey, thank you. Yours was the first thing I ever watched, and it was the first time I saw someone who looked like me. Or it was the first time I saw someone tell a story. My first time seeing someone tell a story of asexuality that like resonated with me was BoJack Horseman. And don't get me wrong, that was an amazing experience, but also I'm a little bit bitter that the first representation of asexuality that like matched my experience was BoJack Horseman. Not gonna lie.
And I think in the TTRPG space, there is a fundamental difference that we also need to recognize. Whether it be comic books or Star Wars or video games or whatever, you can enjoy those things in a vacuum and have all of the toxic opinions that you have. The big thing that sets Dungeons and Dragons and other similar tabletops apart is that it is interactive community storytelling. Every person at your table has a role to play in the development and evolution of your story. Like there's a famous thread on Reddit where a guy goes, hey, I built this whole campaign and I'm the DM, but I don't want my players to like
mess it up
or have any decisions because they'll ruin it. how do I get them to do what I want? And it's like, bro, that's called writing a book.
Yeah.
Like just
Yeah.
it is even more important in the TTRPG space to be inclusive and to make it um, safe and welcoming, because you can't do this in a vacuum. You can't do this without the social component. And again, whether it's music or film or literature, you could be as toxic as you want. Like Orson Scott Card makes a lot of money selling books that exclude people. Um, but here in this space, in our space, you can't without the community, without the people, this withers and dies.
Yeah.
And so if we want this to live, we have to work together to grow the participants.
And I'm also quickly going to say, there is also, people will try to call it gatekeeping, but there is also being protective of yourself, being aware of problems and voicing concerns with people, and coming in and saying, I'm concerned bringing this person to the table because in the past I have seen blah, or they have made me feel blah, is not the same as gatekeeping. And as David said before, you do have to be intolerant of the intolerant, or else the space is not tolerant. So that's the final point I wanted to touch. I feel like we glossed on it a little bit earlier, but we didn't actually get to it. You do have to be protective of your space. Just like I build communities. Whatever I allow in a community, I technically endorse. The company endorses whatever they allow. Just like as a DM, anything that you allow at your table, you are also actively endorsing. So if someone is flinging around, and look, I'm going to straight up not say, you can never be sexist. You can never let anyone utter a sexist thing ever at a roleplay table. That can be an incredible character growth arc, bad guy to overcome. But you need everyone at that table to be aware that this is a character flaw, or this is a point, or this is a thing. Are you all comfortable with it? Because if you're not, I can get this point across another way. Because I love nothing more than proving the man wrong, especially after the man says you can't do it because you're a woman.
And I've had a lot of because Kay and I. So to be clear, Kay has the final word on casting for everything that we do. And it's important that Kay has the final word in casting, because she's way better at finding awesome people to do this than I am. But Kay and I and Zykram and I have had conversations about the sorts of people we like. He complains that I haven't DM'd for him yet, and I haven't because I'm a bad monkey, but I'm working on it. But he and I have talked about, who is he going to play with? Who's going to be at the table?
Mm-hmm.
And we've gone back and forth, and I've been like, oh, I don't want this person there. And he's like, oh, why not? And we got to chit-chatting about it, and he's like, oh, no, woof, woof. And it's true. Like, it's not just, on a stream excluding people. It's also like the people at your table have to be comfortable playing with the people at your table.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not going to sit an anti-Semite right next to a Jewish person and be like, this is gonna be great. Like, it's not gonna work. And so one of those people I'm not gonna allow at my table, and you could take a guess as to who. And so there's like Kay said, there's a big difference between curating your space and gatekeeping. And that's part of what the point of our discussion here is again, how do we not be like the guy
Mm-hmm.
in the Twitter thread who's a jackass?
Yeah.
How do we avoid being jackasses ourselves?
And I've applied recently to be on a lot of streams. I have. I go to a lot of casting calls because I want to play all of the D&D in the world, and David can't run all the games for me, which is not possible. And one of the things, like, I will say is we will get into the interview before, and I'll be like, look, I'm not just here to play someone's girlfriend. If you want me on the stream because I am a girl or a woman, and you want someone with a cute voice to hit on, I'm not here to do that. That said, I have a friend. There's gonna be a thing that's gonna be announced soon, someday maybe, where I went on specifically to lay the seeds for a potential romantic interest. Because I knew the person who was running it, and I knew that this person, I trusted that, you know, if my character went from a guest character to a full-time character, I wouldn't be confined to being just a love interest. I mean, oh, darling, I would be a great boyfriend. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, so, and that was to say, what is fine, it's not even, again, it's intersectionality, it's different what is fine at one table or on one stream might not be fine at another table or on another stream. And we have now talked for 2 solid hours. 2 solid hours about gatekeeping. So first off, reverse gatekeeping is not a thing. You do have to protect your space. If you do feel protective over a thing, if you are upset that people are coming in, ask yourself why. Because there's a chance it might be that, oh no, someone is going to come. Hey, Kato, we're just wrapping up. I'm so sorry. If you're uncomfortable with people coming in, there might be a legitimate reason. It might be, oh, this is a space, you know, I've been playing a game that is all, you know, femme and non-binary identifying people, and now suddenly I'm the only femme or non-binary person here, and everyone else at the table is male identifying, and I'm suddenly not sure my character or anything I wanted to do feels safe here. That's a completely different conversation from, well, if you just hadn't played 5e, they would have rolled back to 3.5, and I want my crunch, and everyone who doesn't want crunch is destroying my game. People can like things for different reasons. Play the game you want to play, and don't begrudge other people wanting to play a different game. And if the game you want to play isn't quite the game you want to play, go to the frickin' DMs Guild or itch.io or Drive-Thru RPG. There's all sorts of supplements. They might not be official from Wizards of the Coast, but you can put your crunch back in your game real easily. You can find it. Just go find it. Chat,
we've taken things from these places and gone, okay, all this is wrong. We're just going to throw this away and start from scratch.
Yeah, we're taking this nugget. Change
this.
Yes. So yes, we've been chatting a long time. Chat, you've been amazing. You've thrown out all sorts of thoughts and questions and opinions and agreements. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Any other questions or thoughts from the chat before we go? I just talked a lot. David, any final closing thoughts from you? Wow.
If you take anything from this discussion, I would say make sure that you are loud and vocal with the communities that you are in, and make a lot of noise about inviting the people that you want to be there. And that doesn't mean that you have to go kick over every rock to find a person of color, or to find somebody who is trans or non-binary, or any of the other things that others use to divide us. But when you have a space, especially a collaborative space, your voice matters, and you have an impact on how welcoming that space is. And I think that if you focus on being welcoming and supporting other people who are welcoming, that you'll have far less trouble going wrong.
And building that space, if you have a space that only looks like people like you, it's not an overnight fix. You don't look around and go, oh, I only know 5 good people to play D&D with, and they're all white. You don't go to Twitter and say, hi, I'm a white person who's only played D&D with white people. I would like to play with not white people. Hi, non-white people, come find me. That doesn't work. It's gonna take some work on your part. It's gonna take some time. And I promise you it's worth the time, because you will start telling stories and getting ideas and encountering characters and events that you never would have otherwise. And again, I am a white person taking up space in this space. But I'm also aware, like I said, I've applied to a lot of things, and I have said, like, hey, I really want to be on this podcast. I love this show. You have a really great cast. I'm also a white person. So if there is someone who is equally as good as me and they are of color, please give it to them. Don't even reply to me. Go talk to the person of color. Because I recognize when I'm taking up space. I'm going to drag Kato into a game. Because Kato's amazing. Kato doesn't need to be in every single one of my games, just like David doesn't need to be in every single one of my games. Different games are great for different people, so I'm back on this thing. Chat, you've been amazing. Kato, I didn't even see how the camera went dark, so I can't wait to watch this clip. Thank you all for watching. Any final thoughts, David? I know I said final thoughts, David, and then I took over and added another thought.
But you have my final thoughts.
Thank you for watching. This has been Tuesday D&D. We're working on a rebrand because I realized I think it's a cute, quirky name, but also it heavily implies that it's only D&D. And this is not only about D&D. This is about all the issues all across tabletop. So we're working on a new name. I had a really cool idea, and some jerk has it, and isn't even using it correctly.
Ideas, feel free to tweet them at K.
Beyond that, if you are in tabletop and you would like to talk about anything, from DM tips to storytelling to how to be a good player, there's a ton of things on how to be a good DM. I want to talk about how to be a good player. From production to how to do charity streams to how to market your stream to I am a person with this background and I would like to talk about my experiences to I am making a game and I would like to tell you about my original tabletop system. All of this is welcome. I would love to have you on. We live stream every Tuesday. So if you're here, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the retweets. Thank you for hopping in chat. All of this helps. It means so much. And we will see you next Tuesday. You all have been absolutely amazing. Goodness, there's not a whole lot of folks that I know. And Jareth is now screaming. Is my noise yeah, you're getting it? Yeah, okay. I worked really hard to set up my noise to maybe gate out his screaming, but that was a particularly loud scream.
Yeah, we only, or at least I only got like those last couple.
So I think we're gonna end the stream there. Thank you so much for coming by. What if you don't want to talk about tabletop at all? You don't have to talk about, I mean, we're gonna talk about tabletop. So if you're here, you're at least gonna have to listen to tabletop, or you could just leave the stream. Like, I appreciate you being here, but if you don't want to talk or listen about tabletop, I mean, I don't know if this is a place for you, but I appreciate you being here. Dungeon Master Ty, I know that you are like old school. If you are welcome at any point, come educate me, please. But seriously, yes, Jareth is demanding food. It is past treat time, so I probably need to go do that. Thank you all again for spending your Tuesday with us. Who do I know? Let's see. Is there anyone playing D&D? Let's see if we can find a D&D to raid. Oh, Barbly Phillips has 1 viewer on their stream. What are they doing? They're building maps. This looks cool. It looks like they're building maps for one of their things. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go raid Barbly. Go say hello. Learned all this stuff from you two today. I mean, David is a source of incredible knowledge and information. I am so lucky But he takes time for me, so you know.
Actually, we should do a map making stream.
We should, but not yet. Once we start working on Wayheart.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you all again. Have a great night. I am KDamnFear on Twitter. That is Full Rubber Ducky on Twitter, and we will see you next week. Have a really great one. Thank you again for watching.